Welcome to Awesome Movie Year, the podcast where we look back at an awesome year for movies, which is every year. My name is Josh Bell, film critic and writer, and I am joined by...
I'm Jason Harris, filmmaker, comedian, human buzzsaw.
And this is the premiere of our second season. So this is exciting that we made it to a second season.
Hooray! Thanks everybody for listening, for giving us the feedback, for voting on our Audience Choice Awards, which is
really an award.
Not an award at all. Just a one episode where if you voted and your movie got the most votes, we did a podcast about it. In a way, it's a punishment.
Right. Yeah, I don't think it's an award for anyone to get a podcast from Awesome Movie Year.
No, so far. No, but keep that feedback coming. You know, we love it.
Yes, keep those cards and letters coming in. We appreciate it.
All the dedications you want, we will give them to forlorn lovers, and we will try to rectify the situations as only Casey Kasem used to do.
Yeah, maybe someone wants to propose on Awesome Movie Year. If you want us to propose on your behalf,
we'll do it. We'll do it. You can choose Josh or me.
Yeah.
Also, I'm ordained, so I can actually, marry you after.
Wow, maybe we can have a wedding on the. We're really like going far away from the purpose of this podcast.
Awesome wedding year.
So season 2 of Awesome Movie Year is about the movies of 2007.
Yes, and season 1, 1994, was one that I kind of pushed for very hard. I felt like it was maybe the first year that really kind of made me aware of wanting to be a filmmaker, and you kind of felt it was a very influential year as well.
Yeah, we were the same age, and I think both of us were discovering a lot of excitement about movies and really getting into contemporary filmmakers and stuff like that in that year.
Right. 2007, this was you, Josh. You really wanted to do 2007.
I did. I mean, I think because 2007 has this reputation among critics and film fans as the best year for movies of the last maybe 15 to 20 years. And we'll see as we go on if that is the case, if we feel that way. Some of the movies we're going to talk about definitely are not the best movies of 2007. And I think there's some great movies that we may not get to. But in terms of recent years, this seemed like the clear choice for us to do.
Let's get into it.
So, as before, the first episode of our season takes a look at the number one movie at the box office. And for 2007, we kind of had two different choices. We are going to talk about Spider-Man 3, which was the number one movie at the box office in North America. It was, however, number 3 at the worldwide box office behind the Pirates of the Caribbean and Harry Potter movies. And we didn't want to do those. So
good choice, guys.
Thank you, David Rosen, producer David Rosen of the Piecing It Together podcast. What were you doing in 2007, Dave?
Falling in love with movies all over again. I agree. This was like probably the best year in the last couple decades.
Well, I'm excited because I don't, it didn't, when you guys started talking about it, it didn't strike me as like, oh, that's the year we got to do. So I'm excited to get into it.
See if we can convince you.
Yes. This whole season will be a personal journey of where I started, and as if my character has had an arc of being convinced that this was the best movie year of the last 15 years.
Okay. Well, we'll see if Spider-Man 3 convinces you. My guess is that it will not. But it did convince a lot of fans, I guess you could say. It grossed $336 million in North America and topped the box office, and $891 million worldwide. So, a lot of money, even if it didn't quite beat out Harry Potter and Pirates of the Caribbean worldwide. And even if 2007 is a great year for movies overall, it's still in the thick of where we still are, where the movies that are the biggest movies at the box office are just franchises.
And maybe this was a seminal year of the franchise, summer film. This was one of the big years where it's all tentpole movies. That's all I got.
Yeah, no, that's true. I think that's true. At the box office and what came out over the summer. But Spider-Man 3, despite making all that money, was not super well received by critics or even fans. It got a 63% rating on Rotten Tomatoes, which is marginally positive, but is not that good. and a B+ cinema score, which is the audience polling service, which is pretty good. But for movies that are big blockbuster entertainment that people love, even a B+ is a little low.
You sound like my dad.
Yes.
I'm just kidding.
Did you get any B+, Jason?
I got some B+.
Yeah, when you copied from me.
What do you think I got? What do you think my GPA was?
Maybe a B-.
No, come on, dude. I got a lot of A's. I got a scholarship to college that I lost. And I graduated college early. I have a natural intelligence, just a lack of work ethic.
Right. I wasn't commenting on your natural intelligence, more the second part.
Yeah, no, I got a lot of A's. And then on the stuff I didn't care about, I didn't get A's. No, my dad was cool about it. So that was a joke, Dad. Don't beat me with the garden hose like the old days.
That is
not a joke, Dad. I remember. Okay, that's fine.
So Spider-Man 3 got a B+. Let's hear some reviews. Roger Ebert said, Spider-Man 3 is, in short, a mess. Too many villains, too many pale plot strands, too many romantic misunderstandings, too many conversations, too many street crowds looking high into the air and shouting, ooh, this way, then swiveling and shouting, ah, that way. And saints deliver us from another dinner date like the one where Peter plans to propose to Mary Jane. That's Peter Parker, played by Tobey Maguire, and his love interest, Mary Jane, played by Kirsten Dunst.
As we have learned from season 1, this podcast, if nothing else, gives me a greater appreciation for Roger Ebert. He nails it a lot more often than most other critics.
Yeah, he does. And he has a great way of expressing himself. And he was not a fan of this movie. Although he loved it. He notes elsewhere in his review how much he loved the previous 2 Spider-Man movies from director Sam Raimi. And I think that was a common response to this movie, that people really liked the first 2 and were let down by this one, even more so because they liked those other ones so much. Some local connection for you. Mike D'Angelo in Las Vegas Weekly said, whoever coined the expression third time's the charm has clearly never experienced the inevitable decline of a Hollywood action franchise. No matter how impressive a Series 2 first entries, and Sam Raimi's previous Spider-Man pictures clearly rank among the finest examples of cinema gargantua ever produced, the third effort will find its charm reserves thoroughly depleted and inspiration gradually devolving into desperation. By now, all novelty has worn off. Characterizations, flimsy to begin with in this genre, have begun to calcify. Do you think all third movies are bad? We were just talking before we started about fourth movies.
Dude, Lord of the Rings. Come on. That's the third one might be the best of the bunch, right?
Yeah. I mean, I think that maybe is a little different because that's a whole thing that they filmed it all at once. Yeah, it's just one big story kind of divided into 3 parts.
Yeah, and like you said before we got on the air, we were trying to figure out the best fourth movie of a franchise ever. If anyone has any feedback, please let us know on any of our socials, Awesome Movie Year or Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. But I mean, like Avengers, the third one's good, right?
Yeah, the third Avengers would be Infinity War.
Toy Story 3, that's a good one.
Toy Story 3 is great.
Yeah.
Even Return of the Jedi, pretty good.
Yeah,
not
solid.
as good as the second one, but pretty good.
I got a good 4 for you guys.
Yeah.
That is totally off topic, but Mission Impossible, Ghost Protocol.
Oh, yeah, that's a great movie.
Yeah, and they're just getting better again.
Hell yeah, they are.
Yeah, I might say that those Mission Impossible movies kind of peaked at that fourth one. I think they've been repeating themselves a little bit. That is way off topic.
Yeah,
Yes,
when you
it
do
is.
Awesome Mission Impossible Year, then you can talk about
I think that you're a huge Mission Impossible fan. That seems like a podcast.
I did the last one especially.
Yes.
So.
But we may get to Mission Impossible one of these years.
Yeah, well, Mission Impossible 2 is definitely the box office champ of its year. So,
oh yeah,
that's just
that's probably the worst of the series, actually.
Yeah. So this has been Awesome Movie Year.
What are we talking about? We're talking about Spider-Man 3.
Right.
One more review for you, a more positive, because it did get a lot of positive reviews. They were mixed, but a lot of people did like it, including Wesley Morris in the Boston Globe, who said, under the playful yet perceptive direction of Sam Raimi, Spider-Man has always been about its character's psychological and emotional tribulations. And he's talking about the sort of controversial Peter Parker dance sequence. And he says, but this sequence feels fresh because it's a real release. The rest of Spider-Man 3 is an intricately plotted saga which takes our hero from adolescence to adulthood. After 6 years, the franchise may be familiar and lucrative, yet it hasn't curdled into a burdensome series of ones, zeros, and dollar signs. So he felt like it still had personality.
Well, and there's, you could be referring to 2 dance sequences from Peter Parker.
That is true. I believe he's referring to the one on the street where he's given the finger guns.
Yeah, where they bring it up in the Spider-Verse, the animated film.
That's true. That's true.
We don't talk about it much. I didn't mind that part of this movie.
Yeah, I think it's interesting that he's talking about here whether it's become just sort of this assembly line product. And I think whether you like this movie or not, you can't deny that it is Sam Raimi doing his own thing with Spider-Man. And that's something that, especially in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, directors don't get to do much anymore.
There's just so much, I think, when we get to the legacy of like what came after and where it is now, and I mean, the first Spider-Man, I think, was the first modern superhero blockbuster that I remember being like, oh, this is an appointment to go
right,
to. So.
Right. I mean, the first X-Men came 2 years earlier, and I think that to me was like the first one where it seemed like a huge deal. I mean, maybe it was for me because I was a big X-Men fan and not as much a Spider-Man fan, but I mean, that movie obviously was a huge success and kind of kicked off the modern era. But certainly the Spider-Man movie in 2002, I think, is when the first one came out.
Right. Do you remember? This was 2007, as we said. Did you see this one in the theater?
I did, yeah. And actually, as we get through this season, my answer on a lot of these is probably going to be the same because I was working as a film critic during this year, so I saw this at a press screening. Although I did not write the review for Las Vegas Weekly.
Mike D'Angelo did.
Damn you, Mike D'Angelo.
Sick burns in there, D'Angelo.
Yeah, he's a very good critic and writer. But I did see it at press screening. And I think by the time I saw it, even before opening, it had already been kind of poorly reviewed. And I went in thinking, oh, this is going to be a disappointment. I loved the previous Spider-Man movies and I'm not going to be into this. And I remember coming out of it thinking, you know what? That was all right. So I was a little more positive at the time than a lot of other critics were. Did you see this when it came out?
Yes, I think, right? Upon watching it again, I'm like, yeah, this seems familiar. This seems like I must have seen it before, but I don't remember any of it, or I didn't really remember any of it in the theater, right? I mean, but I know I saw it, and then even after I watched it in preparation for this, I literally had to go back again to not watch it again, but to do research and be like, wait a second, when did he rescue Gwen Stacy in this movie?
Right.
There's a lot of forgettable stuff in here.
There is.
And that's not always the fault of the film. It's just that it's so we are so beaten down by this genre now that unless you do something amazingly spectacular, then it's tough to remember a lot of things.
Right. But weirdly enough, I think in 2007, when this movie came out, it was more kind of its own. Now we get so many superhero movies every year. And I don't know for sure if this was the only superhero movie of 2007. It may not have been.
Ratatouille.
But if it wasn't, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure when all the Christopher Nolan Batman movies were out, or if there was an X-Men movie from this year. But this was before the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Iron Man didn't come out until the next year. I know that. So this was had more room to breathe, I guess I'm saying, as a superhero movie than the ones that we have now. But you were still feeling sort of the fatigue of too many superhero movies.
Definitely. Go ahead, Dave.
Oh, no, I was going to say there was a Fantastic Four this year.
Ooh, yeah.
That's the one Michael Chiklis.
Yeah.
The first or the second one?
Jessica Alba.
Rise of the Silver Surfer.
Oh, yeah,
that
was the second one. Yeah, which I've never seen, actually.
Me neither.
We're
terrible.
Spoiler, we're not getting to that in our podcast on 2007.
I was fatigued by this. And I mean, I guess, in the next segment, when we talk about what we think about it, we can get deeper into why. But it's just, a lot of it is mashing things together and paint by numbers. And it just becomes too much.
Yeah. Well, I guess what I'm wondering is in 2007, did you feel like, another superhero movie?
Well, I think it must have been more disappointment. If I don't remember it upon watching it, right?
Right.
I must have just been like, blah.
Right.
This is not nearly as good as the first two, which, as you said, universally beloved.
Yeah. I mean, I haven't seen, I obviously watched this one again in preparation here, but I haven't seen the first two in a while. I remember the second one, especially, still, I would think of as like one of the best superhero movies ever made. And I don't know if I would feel that way watching it again now, but at the time, it was just almost perfect.
To speak to superhero fatigue, there was also a Ghost Rider movie this year.
Oh, man. Also, not is that the first one or the second one?
First one.
Okay. Yeah.
Which wasn't as bad. I mean, it was fun in a Nicolas Cage way.
You love Nicolas Cage.
That's
I
true.
love
Yeah,
Nicolas
Dave
Cage,
loves
so-
Nicolas Cage. Yeah, and that was the first one. That wasn't the one that Neville Dean and Taylor directed. I think they did the second one, the Crank guys. But yeah, it was definitely forgettable. I think
Sure.
both that and the Fantastic Four movie were forgettable.
But the point is made. Like, you had to dig deep to find two other superhero movies.
Right.
that
It wasn't
year.
as prevalent now. And that Ghost Rider movie was like a low budget superhero thing that was kind of tossed off. Yeah, but I personally I think I was probably still in my phase of like excitement about the fact that there were all these superhero movies being made, and I'd read comic books for decades, and it was cool that this was something that people were doing. At this point now, I could go a decade without any superhero movies and be happy. But I think back then I was probably still happy that there were superhero movies.
Yeah, I got to the point like very early on, especially when the Superman came out.
The Bryan Singer film?
Yeah. With
Brandon
Kevin
Routh.
Spacey.
Yeah.
Brandon Routh. Really a lot of deep
A
diving.
lot of
there.
problematic stuff in it.
Not Brandon Routh.
No.
You know,
Brandon
so-
Routh seems wonderful.
But
yeah.
just when that came out, everything became so formulaic. I just got so sick of the genre, literally probably until Logan came out, which was a really dark piece and tried to reset that, and Deadpool, I think, were the two that tried to reset the genre.
Yeah.
Through comedy and through the fact that your heroes are going to die and not always in a heroic way and everything. So I was pretty sick of it until then. And now I'm just kind of iffy on the genre. Like, I see everything, but
Right.
Whatever.
Right. Yeah. I mean, we can talk about this more maybe with the legacy of it, but in terms of the period at that moment, I think and that may be one reason why it was disappointing to think that this movie might not be as good, because it was still a big deal. Like, oh, cool, another superhero movie, and I want them all to be good.
Well, not just that, because it's the Sam Raimi film. This film had already had a release date before they went into production on Spider-Man 2, right?
Right.
So they were already planning Spider-Man 4 and 5.
Yeah.
So we had already heard these rumors about, who might be in it, Malkovich, Anne Hathaway, the
Right.
Vulture stuff, right? And Bruce Campbell, they were going to up his character, right?
Yeah.
Was he gonna be-
Dylan Baker, also his character.
Right. So there was just a lot of potential for the Spider-Man universe at that point in time.
Yeah.
And then after those first two just blew everyone away, like, you think like, okay, we're on the fast train to 5 fantastic films. And then
Right.
this kind of derailed all of that. But let's talk about that in our next segment, Josh.
Yes, we'll come right back and give you our general thoughts on Spider-Man 3. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In the first episode of our season on 2007, we're talking about the biggest movie at the box office, Spider-Man 3, which, Jason Harris, I think you didn't really care for.
I didn't love. I didn't hate it. It's just so blasé to me, like there's nothing. I kept like writing down set pieces that like, oh, well, maybe this is good. Where he rescues Gwen Stacy from the
crane.
the crane, and then
Yeah.
Mary Jane falls on the girder, right?
Yeah.
The action stuff is good. I actually didn't even get to the point where I was like bored with it until really towards the end of Act 2 and Act 3. It all just falls apart, and all those criticisms are valid. First of all, the villains are not very ominous, or they're not.
Yeah, there's definitely too many of them, and they were sort of put in the movie for different reasons.
Right.
You've got James Franco, who's been having this arc built over the course of the previous movies, and he's going to become the new Green Goblin after his father has been killed.
Right.
So he's got the whole history. And then you've got the Sandman, who I think was the villain that Raimi really wanted. And then we've got Venom, who was put in at the order of the studio, and they just clash.
It's so strange because all those actors, James Franco, Thomas Haden Church, and Topher Grace. I
Yeah.
like all those actors.
Yeah.
They're all so boring in this film, you know?
They are. Thomas Haden Church, this was like a moment
After
when, like,
Sideways.
right, when it was
Yeah.
like, he's a movie star. And then we quickly realized that he was not.
And he was, to me, the most interesting of the three. I feel like James Franco slept through this performance.
Which is a common thing for James Franco to do.
Yeah, but he's so good when he wants to be, right?
Yeah.
And then Topher Grace, man, that might be the least menacing villain of all time. I didn't see Venom with Tom Hardy, but this made me want to see it just to wash the taste out of my mouth of Topher Grace.
Yeah. I think Topher, especially recently, Topher Grace has really proven himself to have a lot of chops and playing kind of odious, obnoxious people. I mean, obviously, when he plays David Duke in Black Klansman, I mean, he's really good in that part. And this is, I mean, obviously not David Duke, but similarly like a character who is really slimy and just so convinced of his own importance that he'll just screw over anybody to get where he's supposed to be.
I think you're onto something though with the next Spider-Man after
that David Duke should be the villain in the next
after the
Spider-Man
success
movie.
of Far From Home, you know, Tom Holland in the next one should fight a bunch of Ku Klux Klan, David Duke run, you know, mercenaries, and Topher Grace can get his
redemption.
Yeah, as a Spider-Man villain.
Yeah.
He really is not good at Venom.
No, he's not. I think he's fine as like the like dickhead rival to the photographer who's trying to beat out Peter Parker. But yeah, as Venom, he's not. And Venom, he doesn't even become Venom until so late in the movie, which I think speaks to the fact that Raimi was not interested in Venom at all.
It was a wasted character for sure. The Sandman, you know, where he becomes sand and can kind of overpower things. That kind of reminded me of the John Woo Incredible Hulk villain with
Ang Lee, Incredible Hulk.
Yeah, that was bad. So, John Woo Face Off. I like Face Off. So
yeah, and Mission Impossible too. We were just talking
it was
about.
Ang Lee. My bad, bro.
Yeah.
Ang Lee, Incredible Hulk villain. What was Nick Nolte, right?
Yeah, was he the Absorbing Man? No, not the Absorbing Man.
He was just like in space, like in like, you know, molecularly exploding all the time.
Yeah.
And
I haven't seen that movie in a long time.
Maybe I didn't copy enough of your science homework because I didn't understand that. And I really didn't kind of figure out, you know, how this Sandman character worked. And, you know, all I knew is if you threw water on him, that he would cry and go bye-bye.
Yeah, but then he eventually recovered from that as well. But yeah, I mean, I don't think that he works like it's comic book science. There's no actual science to it. It's a mistake to try and think that there is. But yeah, it certainly has that kind of hand waving, like, oh, he's in this particle accelerator thing with some sand, and now but that's the way it is in the comics too. And I think if you cared more about him as a character, you wouldn't worry about whether the origin made a ton of sense. You would be interested in his arc and in his motivations and wanting to get back to his daughter and all the stuff they do for him, which I didn't really feel it. I mean, I think as much as Topher Grace is not very good at Venom as Venom, I thought the character of Eddie Brock and his connection to Peter Parker and being his rival had a much stronger characterization and tied in much better with Peter Parker than the Sandman, who they have to like redo some old backstory in order to make him matter.
Right. They make him shoot Uncle Ben,
which I thought was really cheap and really kind of undermines a lot of what happened in the first movie to get Peter Parker his origin. And it's so iconic to then go mess with it, I thought was really just for the sake of this second-rate villain.
That's what I mean. They're just trying to put too much in here, and, you know, they're sacrificing some points from the world that they've already built. And really, I mean, the real battles here are the characters versus themselves, right? Because it's Peter Parker, this bastion of good, and he shows a different side of himself. And man, Mary Jane, she is not a likable character in this one at all. She is the most insecure actress type that there is, having dated a few insecure actresses. And you know,
are you Spider-Man?
No, but I've been an insecure actress before. So, you know, like, I mean, there, you know, she's on Broadway, and like the first thing she asks Peter is, was I great? You know, do you love me? She keeps asking him. And at one point when he's trying to empathize with her, which, you know, I get it. She's upset that he makes it about him, but she says like, this isn't about you, it's about me. And I'm like, who am I supposed to like in this scene, you know?
Right. Well, he's not very likable in those interactions either.
Right. But I think we're not supposed to like him in those, correct?
That's true. Yeah. The arc of him is becoming sort of unlikable and then realizing he's become unlikable and having to redeem himself. But yeah, she doesn't have much of an arc. And I didn't think she was as unlikable as you thought. I did just feel like it was a bit of a shame that her whole function in this movie is to just be reactive to him and that she doesn't really get much as a character. And again, it's been a while since I saw those first two movies, but I remembered her being more of a substantial character.
Yeah, and also a little more lighthearted, a little more fun and everything.
Yeah. I like Kirsten Dunst a lot. I think I always liked her in this role, but yeah, I think it's not as much for me that they made her unlikable as just they seem to not really know where to take her as a character.
And then they have it's not even really a love triangle with, you know, her and him and Gwen Stacy with a very young Bryce Dallas Howard. She looks so young in this film.
Yeah.
And, you know, at one point, MJ breaks up with Peter Parker. And she's working at this jazz club, and Peter brings Gwen Stacy into the jazz club, and she's just like, oh, your ex-girlfriend's here. All right, I have no problem with this if you don't, right? Like,
well, eventually when she realizes that the reason that they're there is because MJ is there and he does his whole dance bit, she gets upset about it. But yeah, she's even less of a character than MJ is.
It took a really long time for her to get to that point where she like stood up and was like, I can't believe you did this, you know?
Right.
So that was a waste. Yeah, I don't know. I just think there were so many things that just didn't work in this film, that the things that you want to like, which are those big action sequences more than anything else, just they become less meaningful.
Right. Yeah. And even if they're well done from a technical standpoint, if you don't care about whether he defeats these guys or not, or what's at stake, then you can't get into them. I did think there were some impressive ones. The one you mentioned where he rescues Gwen from the crane was really cool. The finale is pretty good, although it does also suffer from too many villains in too many different places and trying to figure out where everyone is in relation to each other. And to go back to what you were saying about Gwen Stacy, she is such an iconic character from the comics. And I think people were waiting for, what are they going to do with her? And they just make her into this nothing of a character.
Right. And she's great in, again, the Spider-Verse, were the animated film. You know, she's got a good meaning in there.
Even in the much maligned Andrew Garfield films where she's played by Emma Stone, she's a much better character.
Well, I choose not to remember those movies. So.
No, that's fair. And there's a lot wrong with those movies, but I feel like Emma Stone's portrayal of Gwen Stacy is one of the things that those movies actually do well.
Yeah, we love Emma Stone.
Yes.
But you know, there were certain things in here that, like, he's doing, like, he's gonna propose to MJ, right? And he's like doing it in the mirror, right? To himself. Like, come on, dude. How tired of a trope is that? Like, has anyone ever done anything like that? Like, hey, when you want to ask someone out, like, do you really talk to yourself in the mirror?
I'm sure some people do. I think in this movie's defense, that some of the things in this movie that seem hokey and cheesy and maybe played out are deliberately done, whether you think it works or not. I think Raimi is deliberately trying to evoke kind of the 60s goofiness of Spider-Man comic books.
Yeah, and sometimes that didn't work for me, as in the Peter Parker Harry fight at Harry's mansion, and there's like this kind of jazzy music in the background, and you're almost waiting for them to break out into a dance number together.
Yeah.
Just I don't know, man. This one just got away from him.
No, I agree, but I think there are certain things that I was watching in this movie and thinking, this is so awkward. And then, because this kind of goes back to what I was saying before about whether you think this movie works or not, this movie is full of Sam Raimi just doing the stuff that he wanted to do. And it's kind of weird and awkward, and it's the kind of thing that you probably wouldn't get in a Marvel Cinematic Universe movie because there's 18 million producers who would veto it.
Yeah, now there is a very rigid form that they're following. A few other things. I thought this was maybe the lamest Stan Lee cameo that we've ever had.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'd have to really delve deeply into that, but it was a pretty weak Stan Lee
Yeah,
cameo.
he just shows up and they're watching Spider-Man on Times Square and he's like, see, some people are good or something like that.
It is possible to make a difference or something. Yeah, something like that.
Now, Josh, did you, when Spider-Man, when Peter Parker had the basketball, in your mind, did that remind you of the time that I played basketball against Tobey Maguire? Because that's what it reminded me of. I just wanted to mention that.
Did you do that when you lived in LA?
Yeah, I was. This was when I was in shape and I could bang under the rim, and it was me and Tobey Maguire and Kevin Connolly from Entourage, and I think Jay Ferguson, the sitcom dad, right?
Right. Yeah. And was on Mad Men. Too.
Yeah. I handled myself. I did really well in that.
Yeah.
Tobey Maguire had a bad back, even at that time.
Oh yeah, that was, I think, was production on this movie delayed, or maybe it was the second Spider-Man because he had back problems.
Maybe because I took it to him.
Yeah, it was your fault.
Yeah.
The downfall of Spider-Man started with you on the basketball court with Tobey Maguire.
And you're welcome, everybody, because as we'll find out in the next segment, the legacy and where Spider-Man is now is in a pretty good place, I'd say.
Yeah. Did you like anything about this movie?
Yeah, I mean, there were some cool things. Some of the effects, like I said, the action sequences. I liked when Spider-Man took the Sandman's face against the train and like shaved it off, right?
Yeah.
So
yes, there's some special effects. I mean, not all the special effects look as good as they would now, but I thought the Sandman effects were pretty impressive still.
Yeah, there were 900 new visual effects that had to be created on a new computer program I had read that didn't exist. I'll tell you what else I like. I mean, obviously we all like J.K. Simmons.
Right, I was going to mention J.K. Simmons.
Man, you know who really makes the most of her screen time? Elizabeth Banks.
That is true, yeah.
She's so good. She's so funny and, so flirty. And she's so campy, and you want that in this.
Right.
There's that moment where she and Peter almost kiss, and J.K. Simmons goes, "That's not the position I hired you for."
Right.
That's great.
Yeah, and I think that is when the kind of campy, cheesy 60s comic style stuff works. When it's that zippy banter, and J.K. Simmons is so good and so entertaining as J. Jonah Jameson, as he was in all three of the movies in this series. I don't know if Elizabeth Banks was particularly well known when she made this movie. I'm guessing not. I remember just when I was watching the opening credits and they get to her name so far down, I thought, wow, she's really not famous at this point.
She wasn't, because as we'll find out later in the season in our Audience Choice Awards, or our Audience Choice film, which is all about Judd Apatow comedies, right?
Yeah.
One of those that was not on this list, but was from his earlier film, was 40-Year-Old Virgin, right?
Yeah.
His first movie. And that was her big breakout, you know? And that was only like a year or two before.
Okay, yeah.
So by the time she was doing this, I think people were like, oh, she's that funny lady from 40-Year-Old Virgin. But we didn't know just how much, how many bullets she had in the holster, so to speak. She's so good. She's so great in this. I wanted to see more of her.
She is. I totally agree with you. And I think it's funny because, of course, now she's a much bigger star than a lot of the stars of this movie. But yeah, I liked her. I liked her dynamic with J.K. Simmons and a bit with Peter Parker. I did think there were some good special effects in this movie. I thought somewhere underneath the character arc of the friendship between Peter and Harry, there's something good there. That to me was the one character arc, because it was building throughout the whole trilogy, that sort of worked in this movie. More so than Peter becoming a dick, more so than his problems with MJ. I thought that had something to it.
And I thought they could have done more with Peter becoming a dick, because if you are a superhero and whether you're just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man or you have to save the whole universe, you can see how that could go to your head and it would have personal effects on you.
Yeah, and they don't really explore that. They kind of write it all off as the Venom alien thingy controlling his mind. And as soon as he gets rid of that, he's immediately back to being a nice guy. Although I did like that they didn't just get him back together with MJ at the end. She didn't necessarily forgive him for everything. They have kind of an ambiguous opening to that possibility at the end of this movie, but they don't wrap it all up neatly, presumably because they were planning more movies. But even without those extra movies, I feel like it's a nice way to end their story and not just have it seem like this super happy ending.
There were some things that I was reading about it, the creative marketing that was done in New York City. Did you read about any of this? There was a spider exhibit at the American Museum of Natural History, workshops on baby spider plants at the New York Botanical Garden. So like the whole city got involved. Green Goblin mask making workshops at the Children's Museum of Manhattan, and a scavenger hunt and bug show at Central Park Zoo. I like that kind of localized marketing to build an audience. It was it averaged $35,540 per theater, which was the highest at the time. Do you know what beat it?
Something terrible, I'm gonna guess.
Hannah Montana and Miley Cyrus, Best of Both Worlds concert.
Wow.
And the only other thing that I found was weird was that James Vanderbilt, one of the screenwriters on this, this was the least successful critically of the three.
Yeah.
And then he went on to write the Two Amazing Spider-Mans, with Andrew Garfield. I was surprised he got those gigs.
Well, I think Sony wanted to continue, despite the fact that this movie was the least successful critically. It made a lot of money, as we've been talking about. And I think Sony wanted to continue in that vein and would have, and we can talk about this in a moment, but they would have continued with Sam Raimi if he hadn't decided to leave. So getting the screenwriter to stay on board makes sense to me.
And Raimi in the press said that he only left because he didn't think he could make the release date.
Right.
And it seems like maybe there'd be a little more to that on both sides of the...
Yeah, well, there was a lot of creative turmoil there. And for this one too. And I think Raimi has said in interviews about this one that he didn't feel like he quite nailed it. So he's with a lot of the people who were disappointed in this movie.
He did call it awful on a podcast.
There you go. Not on our podcast though.
Awesome Raimi year.
Yeah. So I think that is, I'm trying to think of something else that I can say that was positive about this movie, because I didn't hate it. And I think, like I was saying before, in 2007, I came out of the theater thinking, oh, that was all right, being mildly positive. And going into it this time, I thought, oh, I remember I kind of liked this, and I didn't like it as much this time.
You know, the thing is, like, I don't like where you have to show someone's a bad guy when they do something completely out of character, even if they have a Lycra bug suit that makes their mind go crazy. Like Peter Parker hits MJ, right? In that one sequence.
Yeah.
And we have no history that he would ever do such a thing. Things like that bother me. You know?
Right. And that bothered me too, because that's something that it's hard to forgive a character for doing. And it's hard to buy into another character to forgive him for doing it. So, and that was part of why I like the ending, where she doesn't just say, okay, everything's fine, that you imagine that it's going to take a lot of work for him to really get her back. But that does seem like something that would be unforgivable. And especially if this movie came out now, I think people would just not accept that moment at all.
Well, I didn't even accept it.
Yeah. Well, you were ahead of your time.
Yeah, that's right. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here for you.
Thank you. Dave, did you like this movie? When you saw it, did you see it in 2007?
I did see it in 2007.
Did you see it in preparation for season 2 of Awesome Movie?
He saw it in 2007 in preparation for this podcast.
Today, literally this day. I thought it was all right. I didn't love it. I was one of the rare supporters of Topher Grace. I actually kind of liked him in this role. More so as what's his name? Eddie Brock. Yeah, more so as that than actually once Venom stuff started happening. But I actually always thought he was fun in the role. I mean, I obviously haven't seen it in a long time. I don't know if I would still feel the same way, but I remember I was like the only person trying to defend him.
Well, I think I agree with you that he is good as Eddie Brock, as I was saying.
I agree with that. But when they brought up Venom, I think it was a studio executive I was reading about the soundtrack, right? Which is highly regarded.
Yeah, the music is very good.
Yeah, and the way they described Venom, because he had to write the Venom theme, was they wanted him to be the devil personified.
Oh yeah, he's definitely not that.
Yeah.
You don't hire Topher Grace to be the devil personified.
I mean, honestly, I think of all the superhero villains that I've ever seen, he might be the biggest pussy of them all. Like, he's really a weak villain.
He is a weak villain. He is. So, Jason, out of 5 spider webs, how would you rate Spider-Man 3?
I thought you were going to say out of 5 made shots, because that might be how many I made against Tobey Maguire in our legendary basketball game. But you said spider web, so we'll have to go with that. 2.5. This one just didn't do it for me, man.
Yeah, I kind of agree. I think I gave it 3 out of 5 when I first saw it in 2007. But I did sour a little on it. So I think 2.5 is right. It's not a terrible movie. It just is a disappointing one.
You know, when you you don't really like food as like from a pleasure standpoint.
No, I don't like food.
But it's like when you start off with a meal and you're like, hey, this feels good. And then you start to get to like the maybe the dessert and the dessert's not good, and that's the last thing you remember. This is like the second half of the main course plus the dessert wasn't that good. So I just I tolerated the first half. I enjoyed the first half, and then it was like, now I want to go eat somewhere else.
Yeah, it leaves you in not a great place. So we'll come back in a moment and we will talk about the legacy of Spider-Man 3. Welcome back to Awesome Movie Year. In our first episode of our season on the films of 2007, we're talking about the box office champion, Spider-Man 3.
Of North America.
Of North America, not worldwide. Yes, we did not want to watch the 18-hour Pirates of the Caribbean 3, whichever, at World's End. No, maybe that was the 4th one.
And I refuse to watch any Harry Potter film until he comes out of the closet. That I want you to be happy, Harry.
That was an out of nowhere. Where did you get that about Harry Potter?
I watched one of the films and I thought,
you watched one Harry Potter film
that this gentleman needs a little pride.
All right. Well, we'll table that discussion. But
because that was number 2.
Yeah, that was number 2 worldwide. That's true.
You know who I bet could get him to come out of the closet? Captain Jack Sparrow.
That's a crossover we do not need. Definitely not. Please. So Spider-Man 3, as we talked about a little bit initially, and it was interesting looking up reviews for this to quote, and so many of the reviews mention the inevitability of another movie in this series. Everyone just assumed, even if they thought this movie wasn't very good, that there would be another one. And of course, there were supposed to be 2 more, directed by Sam Raimi, featuring this cast, and that did not happen.
Yeah. And isn't that a shame after those 2 hunks of shit, The Amazing Spider-Man came out? Sorry for the language, but those movies are garbage piles, and I don't like them.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, I don't really like those movies either, but I don't feel quite as strongly toward them negatively as you do.
They're freaking horrible.
Uh-huh.
And honestly, I feel like they were just pure money grabs,
That is true, yeah.
And I think Raimi, knowing that this was not his most successful effort, could have come out swinging, for redemption and really knocked it out of the park. Andrew Garfield, who I like as an actor, not a good Spider-Man.
No, he was a poor choice. Although, as I said before, I thought Emma Stone did a nice job. And they did have good romantic chemistry. Of course, they ended up having a real life romance. And that, I think, was one of the things that worked about those movies.
Much like Captain Jack Sparrow and Harry Potter.
That's really... Now, you're just getting into a whole area that we really don't want to touch, I think.
But the good news is these new Spider-Mans, Homecoming and Far From Home.
Yeah, very good movies.
And Spider-Verse, maybe one of the great superhero movies ever made, I feel like.
Yeah, Spider-Verse I like a lot. I think maybe not as much as you do. But as you're saying, like, has tons of references to these Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies, including to this one and to the infamous dance sequence. Yeah.
Where they don't talk about it much.
Right. And at one point they considered trying to get Tobey Maguire to do the voice of that older Spider-Man character, the one that Chris Pine ended up, not Chris Pine, Jake Johnson ended up voicing in that
would have been cool.
That would have been, although I think what Lord and Miller ended up saying was that they felt like it would be too distracting, that it would overshadow what they were doing originally in the Miles Morales character, which I can understand.
I think it would have worked because that movie's just so strong. It would have, and Lord and Miller have a history of referential work. So i.e., everything
Everything
in the
that they've
Lego
done,
movie,
yeah.
you know. But I think it would have been great, you know.
Yeah, I think it could have been fun. I mean, I think the movie works the way it is, and it makes those references that are very obvious to anyone who's seen these Raimi films. But Jake Johnson was great in that part.
Yeah. Who do you think of all these Spider-Man films are the best villains?
You know, I think they've done a really good job with the villains in the Marvel Cinematic Universe ones. I thought Michael Keaton's Vulture was really good. And in the new film, Jake Gyllenhaal as Mysterio was very good. So as much as I like the Raimi films, I think those might be stronger villains in terms of being fully realized characters where you can really understand their motivations and sympathize with them.
I'm going to say Vulture for sure, Michael Keaton. He's so just cold-blooded, man. He's so good. But if I'm going back to these first three, man, Dr. Octopus is great.
He
Alfred
is great,
Molina
yes.
really does the work. And sometimes you just want a villain who just goes all in on it, you know, and is willing to fail because they're willing to take such a big risk and go so big with the performance. And that's Spider-Man 2.
Right.
Awesome. Just
yes.
great.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that is a character that, unlike, say, the Michael Keaton Vulture character, it doesn't have a lot of depth, which is what's good about Keaton's performance, but it's a very entertaining, incredibly, like you said, over the top, but in a good way, in a really fun way, character. Yeah.
So, I mean, look, Spider-Man is he the new head of the Avengers? Is that where he's at right now?
I don't know, maybe.
We're not, Tom Holland does a good job.
Yeah, I like Tom Holland, and he's certainly better than Andrew Garfield.
Right. And then the Spider-Verse, we might get 17 different spin-offs with different Spider-Man.
and there's so many spider-related characters in the comic books at this point that they have a million options for the direction that they could take that in.
So I guess the legacy of this film is, even if you don't make a good Spider-Man, but you have a character that makes a lot of money, you can just keep making the movie.
Well, right, of course. And this movie made a lot of money, and they would have made another one. What do you think about the prospects when they were talking about another Raimi film and they were talking about John Malkovich as the Vulture and Anne Hathaway as the Black Cat? Would you have liked to see that?
I think so. I remember she was great as Catwoman.
She really was, yeah.
And Malkovich, I mean, who doesn't want to see him do anything, right? You
Yeah.
know? So, and I do think those first two were so great that you kind of wanted the redemption of Sam Raimi here, and also those two characters, because Tobey Maguire did an awesome job and Kirsten Dunst did an awesome job in the first two, and this one just got led astray. You know, you give everyone a mulligan and let's come back for Spider-Man 4.
Right. No, I agree. Although I think Raimi made the right choice in that they did multiple drafts of this script and he never felt satisfied with it. And maybe the problem with Spider-Man 3 is that he went ahead, even though he wasn't satisfied with the script or the characters he was supposed to include. And if he had done that again, it wouldn't have been what you said and a chance to come back and redeem himself. It would have been another boondoggle.
Right. We'd have to, you know, have a perfect shot at it, much like I did on the court against Tobey Maguire back in the day.
Thank you for that. So what to me was also interesting was that not only did Sam Raimi and Tobey Maguire not come back to do another Spider-Man, but both of them kind of didn't do much after
Kirsten
this.
Dunst too. Where's she at?
She's done a lot of TV. She was great on Fargo, and I think she's got a new Showtime series that's about to start.
That's good. I love all of them.
Yeah. But I was just surprised. I just assumed, oh yeah, Sam Raimi just kept working. He's only made 2 movies since then.
Drag Me to Hell?
Drag Me to Hell, which is great, was kind of a small scale film. And then he did the Oz movie, which was his next big blockbuster that was not successful and most people didn't care for.
That was with Franco and Zach
Franco,
Braff.
yeah.
Franco's way better in that than he is in this.
Yeah, and I actually kind of like that movie, even though people seem to hate it.
I did too. I thought it was good.
Yeah, but I mean, that was like 6 years ago, I think.
And I mean, you know, they all have the money to retire, but it would be
Sure.
great to see Tobey Maguire come back and do something. I couldn't even tell you the last thing I saw.
Yeah, well, he's been off. I actually read an interview with him not that long ago because he's done a lot of producing, and they straight up asked him, are you going to ever be in a movie on screen again? Because I think his last one was in 2014 when he played the chess champion, Pawn Sacrifice, which was a sort of boring biopic. And even between Spider-Man and that movie, I think he had one big role. The Great Gatsby was his only other big, high-profile, major blockbuster type film that he did after this. And he answered that question at that time sort of ambiguously. I think he doesn't want to say definitively, But the fact that he didn't say, absolutely, I'm just looking for the right role and I can't wait to return, to me indicates that he's not all that interested in acting anymore.
I think, you're probably right, but also if the right one came along, he would jump into it.
I hope that he would, because I do like him. Another thing you mentioned, Tom Hardy as Venom, which became a huge success. So that was another kind of legacy of this movie, is that Venom went on to become a weirdly popular character.
Yeah, and that's a good example of a film that is critically and almost like audience-wide panned, but people love it in regards to what you might want as a cult classic, something that's so bad that it's good.
Yeah, I mean, it made a lot of money. I think a lot of people must have just liked it on its face, which I don't get. It's a bad movie. And Tom Hardy, who can be very good, is not good as Venom, and is
He's
honestly
better than Topher Grace.
I don't know that I would say that, to be perfect. That's how bad I thought that Venom movie was.
What's your favorite Topher Grace film role?
I think it would have to be Black Klansman. He's really good in that.
Over Win a Date with Tad Hamilton?
I have seen Win a Date with Tad Hamilton, actually, and it was not that bad, but I can't recall specific details of it.
How about Kirsten Dunst?
I mean, she's honestly in Interview with the Vampire when she was like 12 years old. She's so good in that movie.
She's great in everything.
Yeah, she is really good. I mean, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind.
Bring It On.
Yeah, and I love Bring It On. Those are two of my favorite movies of all time right there. So I certainly am a big fan of Kirsten Dunst.
And Tobey Maguire, we love The Wonder Boys.
Yes, I do love that movie. But I feel Tobey Maguire, his definitive role is Peter Parker, is Spider-Man. Yeah.
Well, what about Thomas Haden Church, guys?
Lowell from Wings.
Ned and Stacy.
Those are
yeah.
both us. We were going back to the sitcom.
Right. No, Thomas Haden Church is great in Sideways, but like I said, I think the idea that he was going to be this big movie star was a little ridiculous.
I think had he drank wine in wine country and turned into a supervillain, maybe we have an more interesting film.
Maybe. Weirdly enough, the two stars of Sideways both went on to become Spider-Man villains.
Yeah, that's good. And it would be even better if they became Spider-Man.
Yeah. A couple other things I want to mention legacy-wise. J.K. Simmons, who we talked about before, who is great as J. Jonah Jameson, is now back.
How great was that?
That was so good in Spider-Man Far From Home to see him return, and the MCU that really tries to set itself apart from those other movies, acknowledging their existence and how good he is.
And now he's this right-wing conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, he's like the Alex Jones of the Marvel universe.
Absolutely perfect.
I didn't think they could make me like a right-wing conspiracy theorist, but they did.
J.K. Simmons can do anything. And I also mentioned the idea that, like this movie or not, it's very much Raimi's vision, and that you don't get that in superhero movies anymore. I think between this trilogy and Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy, that was sort of the end of the studio giving these auteurs the chance to just do what they want. And now it's all very producer driven. And no matter who they hire as a director, these movies follow a very defined formula.
Sure, but maybe that's the new vision, is through the producer.
It is, but even that vision is not personal. It's more of a corporate vision. I mean, I don't know that you would look at the Marvel Universe movies and say Kevin Feige has a sort of personal stamp on them.
No, I'm trying to think. I mean, Ant-Man's a little different because it's so small and out there.
Yeah, but in Ant-Man, they fired the auteur director because he wanted to do too much of his own thing.
That's true. So I have no point to make.
All right. Well, on that note, I think we can end our discussion of Spider-Man 3. That is this episode of Awesome Movie Year. And you can check us out on social media.
We're still at the same social, guys. We won't leave you. Awesome Movie Year on Facebook and Instagram. Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter. I'm Jay Harris Comedy or Jason Harris Comedy on any of those three things, and go for Jason on the internet.com.
In the internet.com.
Go for Jason.com.
You can find me at joshbellhateseverything.com, at Josh Bell Hates Everything on Facebook, and at Signal Bleed on Twitter. And you can listen to our producer David Rosen's awesome podcast, Piecing It Together.
You can find us at piecingpod.com, on Twitter at piecingpod, and join our Facebook group, Popcorn and Puzzle Pieces.
And what's on tap for us next episode, Jason?
Dude, we got really an awesome movie for Awesome Movie Year. Talking about auteurs, right?
Yeah.
First feature, 2007, Gone Baby Gone, Ben Affleck, and I'm excited to talk about it.
I am too. And last season we had Kevin Smith as our first feature, and now we have Ben Affleck. We're just going through the View Askew universe.
That's right. We can't wait till Jason Scott Lee's first film.
Yeah, that is something. Thank you for listening. Tune in for that next time. Thanks for listening to Awesome Movie Year.
Thank you for listening to Awesome Movie Year. Make sure to follow Awesome Movie Year on Facebook, at Awesome Movie Pod on Twitter, and at Awesome Movie Year on Instagram. And if you like the show, review us and rate us with 5 stars on Apple Podcasts.
And all points west.